Coming up on Network Africa, another 20 years jinx broken as Ethiopia launches first flight to Eritrea in 2 decades. South Africans mark Nelson Mandela's 100th birthday with acts of charity. And South Sudan leaders meet over proposed power sharing deal. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Millicent Walker. Let's start in East Africa, where passenger air travel between Ethiopia and Eritrea has resumed after being halted by 20 years of hostility between the two countries. 2 flights left the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, for Asmara due to high demand. It's the latest in a series of steps aimed at normalizing relations just over a week after the former enemies signed a peace declaration. It also comes 2 days after Eritrea reopened its embassy in the Ethiopian capital. Eritrea broke away from Ethiopia in 1993. 5 years later, they began a border war in which about 80,000 people were killed. In the meantime, the Ethiopian government says it is open to selling off a host of state-owned firms, either partially or entirely, as part of a major economic reform designed to unleash the potential of the private sector. Information Minister Ahmed Shide says the government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, which has announced a stream of reforms since coming into office in April, would retain majority holdings in the state-run airline, logistics, telecoms and energy companies. However, everything else from hotels to sugar farming to cement production could be up for sale, with the sole exception of the tightly controlled financial services sector, whose fate is yet to be decided. But let's get more of the story from an economist and the CEO of Cowrie Assets Management, Mr. Johnson Chukwu. Thank you for joining us on the program. Tell us, what is the economic significance of Ethiopia launching its first flight to Eritrea after 20 years of dispute?
Well, I think it's one critical factor in connecting the two countries. As you might know, Eritrea is a very small country, just about 5.2 million population. And as it stands today, Ethiopia is going to be the best gateway for them to access the world. If you look at Ethiopian Airlines, is connected to about 115 locations globally. And Eritreans, as you rightly pointed out, this country used to be one country until the split in 1993. Eritreans do not have a gateway to the international, to the world, and Ethiopia will provide that. On the side of Ethiopia, they're also looking at economic benefits of that. If you recall, Ethiopia needs to export their export of goods coming from the seaport, from the sea, take about 559 kilometers from the port of Djibouti to come to Addis Ababa. Now, with the restoration of diplomatic link, not just the flights, and if you look at the two heads of state actually agreed on 3 key elements, which is transportation, trade, and communication, because Ethiopia is already looking at how to further expand its economy.
A return ticket for the 1.5, I believe, hour flight costs about $800. Some have said quite high. Depends on the value of the money where you're from. Do you expect the price to come down soon, maybe after the novelty of restoring the flights have worn off?
Yes, I believe the price will certainly come down. In the first place, this is just the inaugural service. A lot of people who are Eritreans who are stranded in Ethiopia who want to get home, and they would want to pay any price to get home. But after some time, the modes of transportation between the two countries will expand. Beyond the air transport, there will also be more efficient road transport system between the two countries. Just about 112 kilometers from Addis Ababa to Asmara, that's the capital of Eritrea. So it's actually a short distance by road. But I want to believe that the restoration of links, particularly the fact that the Ethiopian Prime Minister wants to Eritrea to reopen the port of Asmara. At that port, will be the port for shipping of goods between the two countries. And I think what will eventually happen is that because of that port, once that port is open, the Eritrean government and the Ethiopian government will have a compelling need to have a more reliable road transport system, and that will cut down the cost of the airline tickets. Because once you have intermodal transport system, the passengers will have choices and options.
Finally, Ethiopia says it is open to selling off a host of state-owned firms, either partially or entirely, as part of a major economic reform drive. How advisable is this, and can they succeed? Because we know that corruption is also pervasive on the African continent and around the world.
Well, I think they've succeeded. If you look at what the President, Dr. Ahmed, has done so far since he became the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, the Prime Minister has actually redefined the orientation of the country. And we've seen a lot of private sector investment, particularly with joint ventures with China, that is expanding transport infrastructure. There's now a modern rail line that runs from all the way from Addis Ababa to Djibouti that was opened in 2017. And they've also brought, they also have one of the most viable textile industry in Africa. So I want to believe that what the government wants to do is to allow more of private sector investment into the country. And the only way to do that is to bring in private capital to acquire some of the government-managed entities. Granted that on the balance, one would say that the Ethiopian government, not just the current government, have better managed public sector or public utilities or public sector assets than most African countries. And that's why the Ethiopian airline is the best that we have in Africa today. It's one of the most profitable airlines in the world, and literally about the only profitable airline in Africa. And it's managed by the government. So I want to believe that one shouldn't be so concerned about the issue of corruption creeping into the government selling its assets.
All right, the economist, the CEO of Carrier Assets Management, Mr. Johnson Chukwu, many thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
A bitter row has flared up between a Spanish rescue charity and the Italian government after a dead migrant woman and child were found off the coast of Libya. Proactiva Open Arms posted images of the bodies and its rescue of a surviving Cameroonian woman clinging to timber on their deflated dinghy. The charity says the Libyan Coast Guard had abandoned the three and blamed Italy for backing it. Italy and the Libyan Coast Guard deny the charity's allegations. The Coast Guard says it had rescued 165 migrants on Monday from a damaged boat in the area where the dinghy was found, nearly 80 nautical miles off the coast. Sudan's Foreign Minister Al-Darduri Mohamed Ahmed, who is mediating efforts to end South Sudan's conflict, says rival politicians in the war-torn country are due to decide on whether to agree to a proposed power-sharing deal. President Salva Kiir and his rival Riek Machar signed a permanent ceasefire last month, although there's been some violence since that agreement. The latest proposal would see an expanded government with 5 positions of vice president, including 1 woman. Since the fighting broke out in 2013, more than 4 million people have been displaced by the conflict. The United Nations Human Rights Office has expressed deep concern over growing intercommunal violence in Mali's Mopti region, which has killed nearly 300 people since the beginning of the year. Malians are heading to the polls on July the 29th for a presidential vote meant to draw a line under 6 years of political unrest, jihadist attacks and ethnic clashes, but the situation has degenerated in recent months, spilling over into neighboring countries. Mali's government has repeatedly said the polls will go as planned, but the relentless violence threatens to significantly depress turnout.
We're deeply concerned about a surge in violence perpetrated across communal lines in the Mopti region in central Mali. Since the beginning of the year, the Human Rights and Protection Division of MINUSMA, which is the UN peacekeeping mission in Mali, has documented 99 incidents of intercommunal violence, resulting in at least 289 civilian deaths. 76 of these incidents, which is around 77% of the total, have occurred in the Mopti region alone, and 49 of them just since the 1st of May.
Nelson Mandela was born 100 years ago today, and a century after his birth and 5 years after his death, he is still inspiring people and still provoking debate. In Johannesburg, South Africa, some eminent elders under the hashtag Walk Together for Mandela 100 stepped out on Constitution Hill in continuation of Mandela's long walk to freedom. Among those present were former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, former Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, former Irish President Mary Robinson, businessman Sir Richard Branson, and Mandela's first grandchild, Ndleka Mandela.
The MOU signed today with the National School of Government together with the UNDP regionally. It's a program called Leading Like Mandela, which takes the leadership qualities of what made Granddad the leader that he was. Because we felt, as a Tembekile Mandela Foundation, we felt it is important, it's crucial in the country, regionally, continentally, and globally, where leadership is being put into question. And if you see in most democracies, leadership is one that propels the generation from one to the next, to the next, to the next era. We launched this last year with the University of Johannesburg, which took 100 students from 5 different institutions. And it was there that we saw that leadership is important, because the questions that the young people were coming with made us realize that leadership should not only start at varsity level. Leadership grooming should start much, much earlier.
And our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, is in Johannesburg. Hello, Betty. Tell us, well, we hear it's celebration galore marking Mandela's 100th birthday.
I didn't quite hear you. What did you say?
I said that, tell us, we hear it's celebration galore marking Nelson Mandela's 100th birthday. Tell us about the mood.
Yes. Well, usually Mandela Day, which is July the 18th, is the mood is quite it's a giving mood. Let me put it that way. Giving back to the society in 100. So people are giving back to the society wherever they are. We have school children packing lunches for those who don't have. We have people collecting a lot of things. People repainting old people's homes, and just people inspiring others to be much better in terms of the values that Mandela stood for. So it's a giving mode, and people are actually celebrating. There are hundreds of events.
Betty, we also understand that some people have begun questioning the compromises Mr. Mandela made to secure peace. What can you tell us about that? Betty, if you can hear me, we understand that. Okay.
History where they're coming from, it still remains a vision.
All right, we apologize for that. Moving on to, we're in Nigeria. The federal government appears to have stepped into the boundary dispute between, well, a community in Cross River State and another in Ebonyi, calling for calm following the long-standing crisis. The boundary dispute, which often resulted in violence between both communities, began over a decade ago and has claimed many lives, leaving property and farmlands destroyed. The Minister of Interior, Abdurrahman Dambazao, who led a federal government delegation to Cross River State, said the matter is a source of worry to the government. Come on the program, Liberian President George Weah takes steps to tackle inflation and poverty. Please stay with us.